Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Ashtotar Tatashi Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parudikacharya Ashtotar Tatashi Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavindra Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Okay, so this is the appearance day of Sita Thakurani. You know who that is? That's all right. No points off. Sita Thakurani is Advaita Acharya's wife, consort, eternal consort. She's like the goddess of fortune. And she had a very wonderful role to play in Lord Chaitanya's childhood pastimes. So she's on the calendar, and we're going to read a bit about her at 8 o'clock or so. But now, back in the Bhagavad Gita. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, let's get into the date. On this third day of September 2019 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are still in Chapter 6, Dhyana Yoga, the Yoga of Meditation, texts 20 to 23 on page 275. Yatro paramate chittam nirudhang yoga sevaya yatra chaivatmanatmanam pashyan atmani tushyati sukham atyantikam yathad buddhi graya matindriyam Veti yatra nachaivayam stitash chalati tattvataha Yang labdva chaparang labham manyate nadhikam tataha yasmin stito nadhukena guruna pivichalyate tam vidya dukkha sanyoga viyogam yoga sangitam. Okay, Marcy, try one verse. Yatro padamate chittam nirudham yoga sevaya yatra chaivatmanatmanam pashyan atmani tushyati. Go ahead, Nise. Sukhamatyantikam yattad buddhi grahyamatīndriyam veti yatra nachayvayam sitas chalati tatpataha. Okay, I sent you all the files, so she's going to be chanting soon. You watch. In fact, you can look up the 6th chapter and you can look a few verses ahead, review. Okay. All right, let me read through these synonyms real quick. Yatra, in that state of affairs where uparamate, cease because one feels transcendental happiness, chittam, mental activities, nirudham, being restrained from matter, yoga sevaya, by performance of yoga, yatra, in which, cha, also, eva, certainly, atmana, by the pure mind, atmanam, the self, capital S, pashyan, realizing the position of, atmani, in the self, tushyati, one becomes satisfied, sukham, happiness, atyantikam, supreme, yet which that buddhi by intelligence, grahyam, accessible, atindriyam, transcendental, veti, one knows, yatra, wherein, na, never, cha, also, eva, certainly, I am he, stitaha, situated, chalati, moves, tattvataha, from the truth, yam, that which, labdva, by attainment, cha, also, aparam, any other, labham, gain, manyate, considers, na, never, adhikam, more, tataha, than that. Yasmin, in which, stitaha, being situated, na, never, dukkena, by miseries, guruna api, even though very difficult, vichalyate, becomes shaken. Tam, that vidyat, you must know, dukkha sanyoga, of the miseries of material contact, viyogam, extermination, yoga sangitam, called trance in yoga. Translation. In the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. Purport. By practice of yoga, one becomes gradually detached from material concepts. This is the primary characteristic of the yoga principle. And after this, one becomes situated in trance or samadhi, which means that the yogi realizes the supersoul through transcendental mind and intelligence, without any of the misgivings of identifying the self, small s, with the super-self. Yoga practice is more or less based on the principles of the Patanjali system. Some unauthorized commentators try to identify the individual soul with the super-soul, and the monists think this to be liberation. But they do not understand the real purpose of the Patanjali system of yoga. There is an acceptance of transcendental pleasure in the Patanjali system. But the monists do not accept this transcendental pleasure out of fear of jeopardizing the theory of oneness. The duality of knowledge and knower is not accepted by the non-dualist, but in this verse, transcendental pleasure, realized through transcendental senses, is accepted. And this is corroborated by Patanjali Muni, the famous exponent of the yoga system. The great sage declares in his Yoga Sutras 434, Purushartha shunyanam gunanam patiprasavaha kaivalyam sarupa patishta va chitti shakti. This chitti shakti, or internal potency, is transcendental. Purushartha means material religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and, at the end, the attempt to become one with the Supreme. This oneness with the Supreme is called kaivalyam by the monist. But according to Patanjali, this kaivalyam is an internal or transcendental potency by which the living entity becomes aware of his constitutional position. In the words of Lord Chaitanya, this state of affairs is called Chaito Darpanamarjanam, or clearance of the impure mirror of the mind. This clearance is actually liberation, or Bhavamahadavagni Nirvapanam. The theory of nirvana, also preliminary, corresponds with this principle. In the Bhagavatam 2.10.6, this is called Sarupena Vyavastiti. The Bhagavad Gita also confirms this situation in this verse. After nirvana, or material cessation, there is the manifestation of spiritual activities or devotional service to the Lord, known as Krishna consciousness. In the words of the Bhagavatam, Sarupena Vyavastiti, this is the, quote, real life of the living entity. Maya, or illusion, is the condition of spiritual life contaminated by material infection. Liberation from this material infection does not mean destruction of the original eternal position of the living entity. Patanjali also accepts this by his words, Kaivalyam Sarupa Pratishta Va Chitti Shakti. This Chitti Shakti, or transcendental pleasure, is real life. This is confirmed in the Vedanta Sutta 1.1.12 as Anandamayo Bhyasat. This natural transcendental pleasure is the ultimate goal of yoga and is easily achieved by execution of devotional service or bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga will be vividly described in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. That is the next chapter. In the yoga system, as described in this chapter, there are two kinds of samadhi, called sampragyata samadhi and asampragyata samadhi. When one becomes situated in the transcendental position by various philosophical researches, he is said to have achieved sampragyata samadhi. In the asampragyata samadhi, there is no longer any connection with mundane pleasure, for one is then transcendental to all sorts of happiness derived from the senses. When the yogi is once situated in that transcendental position, he is never shaken from it. Unless the yogi is able to reach this position, he is unsuccessful. Today's so-called yoga practice, which involves various sense pleasures, is contradictory. A yogi indulging in sex and intoxication is a mockery. Even those yogis who are attracted by the siddhis, or perfections, in the process of yoga, are not perfectly situated. If yogis are attracted by the byproducts of yoga, then they cannot attain the stage of perfection, as is stated in this verse. Persons, therefore, indulging in the make-show practice of gymnastic feats or siddhis should know that the aim of yoga is lost in that way. The best practice of yoga in this age is Krishna consciousness, which is not baffling. A Krishna-conscious person is so happy in his occupation that he does not aspire after any other happiness. There are many impediments, especially in this age of hypocrisy, to practicing Hatha Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. But there is no such problem in executing Karma Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. As long as the material body exists, one has to meet the demands of the body, namely eating, sleeping, defending, mating. But a person who is in pure Bhakti Yoga or in Krishna consciousness does not arouse the senses while meeting the demands of the body. Rather, he accepts the bare necessities of life, making the best use of a bad bargain, and enjoys transcendental happiness in Krishna consciousness. He is callous toward incidental occurrences, such as accidents, disease, scarcity, and even the death of a most dear relative. But he is always alert to execute his duties in Krishna consciousness or Bhakti Yoga. Accidents never deviate him from his duty, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 2.14, Agama pahino nityas tangs titikshasva bharata. He endures all such incidental occurrences because he knows that they come and go and do not affect his duties. In this way he achieves the highest perfection in yoga practice. Om jnana timarandasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshu unmidatam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So we could actually write a whole paper on this section here. There are many things to discuss. But just an overall view, this is kind of a climactic point in this chapter, because Krishna has been describing yoga for all these 19 verses. He describes the basic principle of yoga, which is controlling the mind, making the mind the friend, not the enemy. He talks about impediments to success in yoga, eating too much, not eating enough, so forth. And then he describes the nature or the actual practice of yoga. We're on page 275. Hare Krishna. Welcome. And now, after, of course, the summary is a very brief description. But now he's describing the goal, the actual achievement of the highest perfection of yoga, in text 20 to 23 in page 275. So let's examine what Krishna describes here in these 3.5 verses, you may say. Yatra uparamate chittam. So uparamate means to cease. The mind has become fixed. This is the end point of perhaps years of practice of bringing the mind back, as Krishna will describe, from wherever and wherever the mind wanders. You have to bring it back under the control of the self, cap S, control of Krishna. Nirudham yoga sevaya means being restrained from matter. The whole situation in this dhyana yoga, ashtanga yoga practice is to minimize the distractions as much as possible. You're alone. You're in a cave somewhere or some secluded portion of a jungle, and you've tried to quiet the mind. You're not letting the distractions, bother you. And this pranayama, anyone who practices it knows that's a very nice way of calming the mind. So now you've reached a point where you're able to have sustained meditation on the object of meditation, which is Krishna. That became clear. What was that, verse 16? No, he's describing the actual, this 14. Yukta asita matpara. That phrase matpara is key. It means making me the ultimate goal. The ultimate meditation is on Krishna. Krishna is describing it here. So, then this atmanam, you're dealing with the mind and the soul, which are both called atma. So by the control of the mind, you're trying to focus on the supreme self here. And that supreme self is the super soul. That when you see the capital S, that means the super soul. Now, he sees, this is a very important point, you have a direct perception, pashyan atmani tushyati, and that vision of the Lord in the heart brings you great transcendental pleasure. This tushyati, well, how does Prabhupada describe it? One becomes satisfied. And sukham, the next very word is sukham, atyantikam, ultimate happiness. This is the ananda, although that word isn't used here. That's the ananda that we're searching for and that we've lost touch with all these millions of births. So this seeing the Lord, this direct perception, this word comes up again and again in the discussion of yoga. In the second chapter, first canto of the Bhagavatam. And the Bhagavatam is wholly and solely about bhakti. And they also discuss at various points this kind of yoga. Especially this Kapila Dev Muni, he talks about meditation. But it's all on meditation of the super soul within, but it's discussed, of course. So there in this second chapter, first canto, you have a series of verses. The question was, what is the supreme dharma by which the soul can be truly satisfied? These terms, which are, they're all English terms by now. English is like a big vacuum cleaner. It just takes in. We got French over here, Greek coming in here, Latin, German. I deal with the language. So this word, the Dharma, you'll find it in the English dictionary. Karma is there. Yoga is certainly there. In fact, I looked at I had one of these old-fashioned, maybe before your time, not before your time, unabridged dictionaries. They weigh about 30 pounds. I lugged it all the way from Miami to SanDiego and then finally threw it out when you can find everything online. But I finally said, well, I wonder if the word Kshatriya is in here. That was a long shot. And sure enough, in the unabridged dictionary, it had been drawn in by the British, because the British Raj in India, they drew a lot of these terms. So this term dharma simply means a process or a system of activities that bring you from one point to another. Now, dharma can also be used for economic development. That's also this religion. Prabhupada would call it religiosity. In other words, it's what's termed in the beginning of Bhagavatam cheating religion, because real dharma, Bhagavad dharma, is meant wholly and solely for the elevation of the soul beyond the bonds of matter and going back to Godhead. That there can't be any material desire involved. If you're using religion or some dharma to increase your material prosperity here, it's misuse. The point is you're staying more and more entangled in the material world. So at the beginning of the Bhagavatam, second verse of the whole 18,000, it says in this book, in this Purana, dharma projita kaitavotra, atra means here, that all of this cheating dharma is kicked out. Materially motivated dharma. So then the question arises from the sages in Naimisharanya, well, what is that supreme dharma by which the soul or the souls who practice it can be fully satisfied? It can't be something material, because material happiness, no matter how rich you are or how much facility you have, cannot be true happiness because it's temporary. We are by nature eternal, and we by nature eternal enjoyers. And this phrase is brought up in the purport, Anandamayo Vyasat. This is a whole sutra. The sutras are little aphorisms describing the supreme absolute truth. As Anandamaya means made of Ananda, full of bliss all the time. And how do we know? By abhyasat, by studying his activities in life. That shows that Krishna is always full of bliss. So we're part of Krishna, right? Part and parcel. We're Anksha. That means we have his qualities in minute degree. So he's infinite, he's everywhere, he's always enjoying bliss. But we also have that Anandamaya Vyasat quality, but we've lost touch with it. We're trying to fulfill that enjoying propensity through matter, through these imperfect senses. And as we can all attest, even living, no matter how long we've lived in this world, we can't always be happy. Oftentimes we're sad, sometimes extreme suffering. What happened? Because we're not God. We cannot control everything. So this is an effort, the yoga system is an effort to regain what we've lost, which is that anandamayo quality, that full blissfulness. So here he's saying that it's revived, it's sukhamatyanti kamyata. It's another way of saying ananda, of unlimited bliss. So back to I just wanted to share with you this passage in the second chapter, because he talks about the real dharma being that which awakens bhakti, pure bhakti to Krishna. Savai pungsang paro dharma yoto bhaktir arhokshaje. That real dharma, that dharma which can bring about full satisfaction, paro dharma, supreme dharma, is that which awakens bhakti to adhokshaja. Now every word is so important. Adhokshaja is a name for Krishna, a name for God, that is often invoked at the beginning stages when we're coming out of the situation of just dealing with what we can see and hear and understand with our senses, to having some vision or understanding or at least desire to know the transcendence, which means beyond the realm of our senses. We have some preliminary faith that there's another life, there's another level to existence, and I want to know what it is. So that's what Adhokshaja means. Adhokshaja is a name for God. Akshaja, Aksha's eyes, Jas means born, like Janma. The knowledge which is born from our senses. This is the scientific method. This is simply investigating with more and more powerful tools, but the same senses, the same mind, this material world. Beyond all of that, Ada means down. Means that Krishna, the transcendent, it literally means the transcendent one. He defeats or is beyond all the knowledge we can gain with our senses. So naturally, if we're going to aim for that end, we have to have faith. We can't. It's not all simply confirmed by what we can see and hear. There has to be faith. So he says that dharma is supreme, which engenders pure bhakti to this unseen Lord, to the transcendental Lord. And what are the two salient qualities? Ahaituki and apratiyata. Now, haituki and pratiyata means without any material motivation. You don't pray to God or to Krishna for anything material. Now, what do you pray for? Well, we get so many nice examples in the Bhagavatam. Queen Kunti, let my mind always think of you. Let my love always flow toward you. That's it, Please, my dear Lord, take away all of these material desires that are impediments, In other words, the prayers are all for furtherance of devotional service, not for anything material. So then he goes on and he describes in more detail what is that entity that we're trying to perceive. And he says there are 3 levels: Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. This is the absolute truth we're looking for. Brahman, there's the same entity, but understood by different levels of approach. The example is the sun. The sun, like every day we're chanting japa here. So if you look out the door, you look at the sun must be coming up. It's getting light. You don't see the sun. It may not even be over the horizon, but you see the effulgence of the sun. And that's also the sun, But it's just the energy of the sun. So that's compared to the Brahman. Then you have the sun is well up in the sky, and you go outside and you look at the sun is there in a certain part of the sky, the localized part. That's the Paramatma, localized within each one of our hearts and within each atom. And then if you actually go to the sun somehow, and you meet the sun god, that's Bhagavad. You see? So this is the Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So how to realize this? Tatchadadana munayo jnana vairagya yuktya pasyantyapmani chatmanam bhakta shuddha gahitya. That can be recognized, this word faith comes in. By faithfully practicing bhakti yoga according to what is received in the authorized shastras and taught by the great souls. Pasyan atmani, one will eventually see pasyan atmani, the soul in the heart, the super soul in the heart, you see? So then he goes on, and because he's talking to a general audience here, and he's bringing them out of the realm of varnashram. Varnashram is a whole way of organizing society with 4 social divisions and 4 spiritual divisions. So he says, the whole point of varnashram is not to establish some caste system, so everyone is, rather is to satisfy Krishna. All the ashrams and all the orders, when they're focused on bhakti and satisfying the Lord, there's true harmony. Even the Shudras, those who are at the bottom of the social scale, can be happy and pleased, if there's plenty of kirtan and plenty of prasadam and they're taken care of, not just exploited. You see? The Krishna in the center makes everybody satisfied. It changes the character. But when the whole thing is material, the material motive is present, nobody becomes satisfied. The Brahmins feel they're not getting enough respect, the Shudras feel they're not getting enough pay, the Vaishyas are competing with each other to make, and the Kshatriyas, they become corrupted, and it becomes, the despotic kings that we had in the 15th century. So the purpose of the whole thing is to satisfy Vishnu. Then he goes on and explains that the whole key is to attain the sword of knowledge. I don't know, some of you, maybe all of you were there on Sunday night when he spoke about the sword of knowledge. And I shared with you that verse. At the end of the 12th chapter in the 5th canto, there's a beautiful verse by Bharat. Bharat had been a king, gave it up to meditate, very austere. And he was at the level of Baba, but he was all alone. And then I told the story how this little fawn, came because the mother was killed, by fright, by a lion and everything. So here's this helpless fawn. So he takes care of the fawn and gets attracted to the fawn, and he can't concentrate anymore. He's distracted. Is she okay? Like that. And so he dies thinking that fawn. He becomes a deer. So, but he had remembrance because he was so advanced. He could remember his past life. So he just didn't hang out with the deer. But he would, get wherever the devotees were hearing and chanting, and he would listen to them, So he left his deer body and became Jadabharat, the 3rd incarnation. He's a Brahmin family, but he played at being dumb. He didn't speak. And so they thought he was really dumb. And so they didn't bother him. In this way, and then they tried to sacrifice. Did you hear it? They tried to sacrifice him? You didn't hear that part. Maybe I told in the morning anyway. Yeah, there were these Kali worshippers, and they arrested him. They said, "Oh, he's a good candidate for our sacrifice for Kali," and he didn't complain. He just was, just like Ambarish. That's why I saw this early Ambarish. Fiery demons coming in, just Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So Kali comes out of the statue and beheads all of her worshippers because she's a real devotee. She's a devotee. She's a pure devotee. Anyway, so the moral of the story is that that in his Jud Bard he began to speak when he met King Rahugana. There was this king. He said, "Well, he's stout and strong, so let's arrest him, make him a slave, so he can carry the palanquin." But he wouldn't step on the ants, so it was a very uneven ride. So the king is complaining. So finally he speaks, and he's speaking this transcendental knowledge. And the king, who's pious actually, he gets down from his palanquin, offers a base, and says, "Oh, I'm sorry," So there's a whole interchange there, where Jud Bard is teaching King Rahugana. So in the process of teaching him, he speaks this verse about the sword of knowledge. Tasman naro sanga susanga jata jnana sinenaiva vivrikna moha hading tadiha katanashutabhyam labdasmati yatyati padamadbhana. So what he's saying there, because he says therefore, and I was reading some of the commentary, and what happened with King Bharat, he had everything going. He was practicing this yoga basically, but meditating on Krishna and getting to the point of atyantikam sukham. But he got distracted because he didn't have a guru. He couldn't take shelter of his guru for advice when he became distracted. Any devotee, would have responded to that fawn, I mean, it's a helpless fawn who knows anyone else, so naturally. But when that fawn had been saved, and was on his own, then he had to have the strength of mind to leave. That would have been the result, to just leave, because otherwise he was going to get tangled up again in material life, which is what happened. So he didn't know about that. So he got completely distracted, and he became. So this was his verse that described what he should have done, because what it says is tasman naro, a human being, asanga susanga jata jnanasina. The jnanasina means the sword of knowledge. Asina means a sword, and jnana is knowledge. So how does one to get that sword of knowledge? That's described by, he says, Dasman naro asanga susanga. Asanga means giving up association of non-devotees, and sangha means association with devotees, especially pure devotees. That's how you develop your knowledge. You have to have that decision. You make that decision. That's why Prabhupada works so hard to start these temples and ashrams, so that devotees could actually live together and have a shot to really develop real knowledge and bhakti. So, what's the result? Vivrikna moha. You can cut off all the illusion with this sort of knowledge. But that's not the end of it. Then it goes on. It says, Harim tariha. Iha means activities or pastimes. Of Hari, of Krishna. What? Katana shuddhabhyam. Chanting and hearing and chanting. Which develops labda smriti. Now labda smriti means two things. One is that, as Prabhupada defines it, you regain your remembrance of what we long ago forgot when we fell from the spiritual world. It's all in there. That's why often devotees, they read Prabhupada's books and say, this is what I've been thinking of so long, and it awakens dormant to Krishna consciousness. So labda smriti, and then yatyati padamadvana. One nicely traverses the path back to Godhead. The Advana's path, and atipada means the supreme goal. So getting that sort of knowledge is what we're engaged in here. Now, I just wanted to, because we're talking about seeing, the end of these verses in that second chapter, and we made a book out of it, which you can get here, or maybe I have an extra some at home. For those of you who are steady class goers, I'm going to bring some copies of this book, and you're going to get it as a prize. Maybe we'll start reading it. It's called Dharma, the Way of Transcendence. And it's all based on these verses 1-2-6 through 21 or 22. There's about 15, 16 verses there. Now, after he goes on describing, here he's talking about seeing in the heart, and then by developing this sort of knowledge. How does one develop it? By hearing, right, in the associate, hearing from the right sources and giving up hearing from other sources. So how does one get that taste for hearing? This is key. Shushu shosha dadhanasya vasudeva kata ruchi. Vasudeva kata ruchi means the taste, ruchi, for Vasudeva kata, Krishna kata. Sound vibration about Krishna, beginning with the holy name. That is the most attractive element for all the bhaktas, to hear the transcendental sound vibration vibrated by a pure devotee. Then you can experience Krishna directly, and there's no limit to it. So, but how does one get the taste for that? So here he describes shushu shosha dadhanasya. Now some of you may have, in other classes, this word shushu sho is very important. We'll describe it. Shodadhana, here's the word faith again. Shodadhanasya. Vasudeva kata rushi syan. The word syan means to come into being or engenders. Vasudeva kata syan mahat sevaya vipra punyatirtana shevanat. By service to the great souls. In other words, here we're back again to the preceptor, the guru, the sadhu. By service to the great souls, one gets a taste for hearing. This is what Prabhupada gave when he came. He was vibrating, constantly, where he had freedom. At first he had no freedom. He was with this Dr. Mishra, who was preaching Mayavad, and Prabhupada, he was trying to give the same crew the bhakti, but he said, I'm going to lose all my students. So as much as he liked Prabhupada, he wouldn't let him preach. Just chant kirtan, So he's frustrated. Finally, Prabhupada got his own venue down in the Bowery and, of course, 26 Second Avenue. So he would meet with people. Can you imagine? You want to meet the Swami? Just go upstairs. How'd you like to go upstairs here and meet Prabhupada and sit down for an hour and speak with him? Many, many, many lifetimes. You could. Well, that's what they had. He was giving by the hour. He was speaking because it was, this was his chance to implant that seed of faith and interest in the subject matter, and because of his purity and because of Krishna's arrangement, and it worked. They got some taste. And the main thing is they started chanting. By the chanting, after hearing from this great soul, then the heart becomes open and become more receptive, and you get more taste. So this shushu sho means, this is the key word. It means ardent hearing, probably called ardent hearing, or submissive oral reception. You'll find this phrase if you search for it. It means hearing with rapt attention without all the static and the doubts and everything, and taking in the vibration, accepting it, and relishing it, and then putting it to practice. And when you do that, then you get more taste. The whole thing is just increasing the taste. That taste matures into real attraction for Krishna, which then matures into bhava, ecstatic attraction, which matures into prema. It's a ladder. It's described by Rupa Goswami. So I wanted to finish up because we come back to the point of seeing the Lord in the heart. And so now, after one follows this verse, and by serving one's guru and sadhus, he gets a taste for hearing, then what happens? Then the last 5 verses, and here's like the climax of the whole thing. Oh boy, oh boy, I can't remember. Forget I lost this verse. Shinvatam sukata Krishna punya shavana kirtana. So now the hearing is there, and rapt attention, right? Shinvatam sukata Krishna punya shavana kirtana karidyan taksto yabadhrani vidunoti suritsatam. Very important verse. That pamphlet that we were looking at, Reservoir of Pleasure? That whole lecture, which is the feature of that pamphlet, was based on Prabhupada's talk he gave on this verse. So Shinvatam Sukata. So Krishna is the subject here of this sentence, of this verse. Krishna, in the heart, he understands when the devotee is listening to his kata. Shinvatam Sukata Krishna, which is Punya Shavana Kirtana, which itself, just by hearing and chanting, brings you so much piety. Just by hearing, just by chanting Hare Krishna. Punya Shavana Kirtana, by hearing and chanting. Hridyantaksto yabhadrani. So situated in the heart, Krishna, he cleanses away the abhadras. The abhadras are the inauspicious things in the heart which are keeping us bound to this world birth after birth. Material desires, anxiety, lust, anger, greed, illusion, madness, intoxication. These are in the mind. So those are inauspicious. They need to be cleansed. It's a cleansing process. And Krishna himself does it. And then what happens is, this is a verse we chant often before every Bhagavatam class. Any of you have been to Bhagavatam class? Nashta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavadgita shloke bhakti bhavati naishtiki. So here, nashta prayeshu means when these abhadras are almost cleansed, but there's still some. It's not complete purity, but even quite pure. Abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya. Now every phrase is so important. Bhagavata means something in relationship to Bhagavan. Srimad Bhagavatam means it's all in relation to Bhagavan. But there's also the Uttama Bhagavat, the Mahabhagavat, the person Bhagavat, who is the Acharya. So, Nashtaprayeshu, Abhadreshu, when these abhadras are cleansed away to a large degree, but not completely, by the process of constantly or regularly hearing from the Bhagavatam or from the Mahabhagavat himself. There's two meanings. By service. The main service that we do to the great devotees is to hear from them very submissively and with great ardent attention. So Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, that's the Sevaya. Bhagavadgita shloke bhakti bhavati naishtiki. So what's the result is, by this bhakti, engaged in this way to Bhagavan, Uttama shloka. Uttama shloka is a name for Krishna. Anyone have an idea what it means? You know the word shloka. Uttama shloka means, that's a good guess, but not exactly. Uttama shloka means he who is glorified in the best of shlokas, best of poems. Common name. So what's the result? Nityam Bhagavata say Bhagavad Uttam Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. One becomes fixed in devotional service. Bhakti Bhavati. Naishtiki means nishta, fixed. Now Prabhupada, little side light, as Bhadrinarayan would always say, as a side light, the editing pastimes. So this is not me. Prabhupada wrote in his original Bhagavatams. This is so foundational for this movement that Prabhupada was able to produce at great effort over a period of 4 or 5 years those 3 volumes of Bhagavatam. One day I'll bring them. I have an original set, that we brought over on a boat, or maybe was sent the next shipment, but the original printing. And great effort. Can you imagine? No money. He's living as a sannyasi. But somehow he got the first volume printed. He took the first volume around to leading people. He even met the Prime Minister of India, the President of India. And he somehow raised enough money to print the second volume and got the 3 volumes together. And then he was ready to come to America, 1965. He started in 60, doing that in 1965. Finally he had those 3 volumes. So what Prabhupada wrote, in those verses, is by regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam. That's what's in the translation. This is the Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, by always serving the Bhagavatam, by regular hearing. But by regular attendance in classes on Bhagavatam, how does he put it? By regular attendance in classes on Bhagavatam, and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotional service to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in the best of songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. So this is very important. That's Nishta platform. So in the original editing, when our first editor edited that whole book under Prabhupada's instruction, he said, well, this regular attendance class, he just said, by regularly studying Srimad Bhagavatam. And that's what devotees had. From 1972 to 1976. Now, Jayaveda Swami carefully went over that editing, and he said, well, wait a minute, this says by regular attendance in class in Srimad Bhagavatam. So he put it back like that, and when the printing came out in 76, some devotees were complaining, just see, they're changing Prabhupada's translations to try to get us to go to Bhagavatam class. So Jayaveda said, well, wait a minute, here's the original book, see? Prabhupada wrote it. Devotees had to be convinced that wasn't just a ploy of the GBC to try to get us to go. Anyway, so it goes on, and what happens next? So we're almost at the point, back to our verse here. So, tada, at that time, by becoming fixed on nishta, really firmly, in devotional service. Tada rajastamo bhava kama lobha today, that you're no longer troubled by the lower modes of nature. You're in the platform of goodness, or almost pure goodness. And along with being in that state, you're free from the powerful forces of lust and greed and anger, and all, which are part of the lower modes. So it's very good to be fixed in that higher mode of goodness, or even pure goodness. So tadara jastama kamalo chaita eta unavidam. The chaita, the mind, is not disturbed by these things. Stitam sattve prasidati, and you're fixed in goodness. And then, 2 more verses. Evam prasanna manaso bhagavad bhakti yogata bhagavad tattva vijnana mukta sangha sajayate. So, prasanna manasa, Prabhupada would always translate it as very joyful at heart. Prasanna has 2 meanings. It means very, very clear. Do you know the word pellucid? Does that name ring a bell? Lucid. Pellucid means extremely clear. Very, very clear. The mind is cleared up. And naturally joyful. Remember we read that if you control the mind, the super soul is already reached. There's a verse here. And so one is naturally, that natural anandamaya state that we were talking about, Prabhupada refers, that starts to come out. You say the real devotees are always jolly, because they see the pastimes of the Lord being enacted everywhere. This is what in the verse. So, prasanna Bhagavad Bhakti Yoga, Bhagavad Tattva Vijnanam. Now this word Vijnana. There's jnana and Vijnana. So jnana is knowledge. We're getting knowledge here, reading Bhagavad Gita. It's very interesting. But when we actually realize the knowledge, we see the super soul, we see the soul, and we experience it directly. That's Vijnana. So that comes at this stage. Bhagavad Vijnana Mukta Sanghas, and you're liberated. Mukta Sangha, liberated from any attachment to this world. Sangha means association, and it also means attachment. Mukta Sangha jayate, means you've conquered over all these attachments. And now comes the final verse in another little editing pastime. So the next verse says, Vidyate, this is like the final one in the series. Vidyate vidya grantis, chidyante sarva samshaya, chiyante jasya karmane, drishta evatmanishware. Drishta means to see, just like pashyati. You see, we say pashyati, right? That's how I got on this. Pashyan. So, now the final state. Vidyate vidya, remember the vidya granti, that the knots in the heart? It's like a graphic description of the things which keep us bound here. But they're all cut. There's not even a smidgen of attraction for this world left. You're all simply focused on Krishna. So Vidyate Chidyante Sarva Sankhya. There's no doubts left because you have all this vijnana. You're getting this realized knowledge. No one can convince you, against it. So Sarva Chiyante Chasya Karmani Drishta Evatmani Shure. All of one's karma has been completely eradicated. And then Drishta Evatmani Shure. Now, this phrase, if you look up in your Bhagavad Vedas or anywhere, it's 1:2:21, I think it is, you'll find it says, and when one's karma is completely eradicated, one sees the self as master. Sees the self as master. Now, what Prabhupada originally had, and was also mysterious, one's karma is eradicated with one seeing of oneself, the dominating factor. No punctuation in there. Dominating factor. Now the original editor said, what do I do with this? One seeing oneself refers to the soul, oneself, and the small s as self, And but we're not the dominating factor. The Ishvara, that's God. Right? Ishvara, Ishvara Sarvabhutana, Ishvara Paramakrishna. So he didn't know quite what to do with it. And so he came up with this idea of kind of fudging the whole thing. Instead of saying oneself, which is obviously the soul, seeing oneself, he said the self. And we notice that if I don't tell you it's a capital S or lower S, you're not sure which self that refers to. It could be the individual self or the supreme self. So, but he couldn't change it. So lowercase s. One sees the self as master. And devotees have been puzzling over that for years. Shouldn't that be a cap as self? They ask me, they write me from China and everything. So, faced with this dilemma, this puzzle, I look carefully at the purport. Because what is Prabhupada trying to say here? First of all, he said the self is master rather than a dominating factor, which is Prabhupada's particular translation of the Ishvara in that particular verse. But in the last part of the purport, he says, one sees one's master. Okay, so you see God within the heart, right? Pashyan Atmani Tushiti. He sees the super soul in the heart. So that mystery is solved. But what about the other part? At the beginning of the purport, Prabhupada says, with the realization of, and then he goes back to a verse to the Vijnana. I can illustrate it with the book, it's easier. When the self realizes the Supreme Self, he automatically sees himself. So he's seeing both. You're seeing yourself in your original spiritual form, and you're seeing God within the heart. You're seeing Krishna within the heart. And so what came out, and what is now in the Veda base, and hopefully will eventually be printed in a physical book, is one sees oneself and one's master, which is exactly what Prabhupada intended. But sometimes it didn't come out in the way it was. So that's what's talked about here. Pashyan Atmani Tushiti. Back to our verse here. But now we're almost out of time. I'm sorry. We went on so long. We're gonna also read this verse tomorrow because it's so important. Sorry I didn't get so far. We have just enough time to read about Sita Thakurani. There's not that much in the Samadhi's book, but there is some very sweet talk about her, and I've got it all keyed up. Sita Thakurani, now she was in the role almost like a grandmother of the age when Nimai was born. You know, at Vaidacharya, you always show him with the white hair. You know, so he was older, quite a bit older than Lord Chaitanya. But Sita Thakurani, she took the role of beloved mother or grandmother to Nimai. So she lived in Shantipur. Shantipur is fairly near by Mayapur. It's all part of it in Bengal there. She lived in Shantipur as the eternal wife of Sri Advaita Acharya Prabhu. She was always absorbed in Vatsalya Prema, parental love or maternal love for Sri Gaur Sundar. Just after Lord Chaitanya's appearance, Sita Thakurani came to Mayapur. She brought a basket full of garments and ornaments, silken children's clothes, jewel necklaces, tiger nails set in gold, all for a little baby would like. To worship the golden baby, she also brought auspicious articles like fresh grass and turmeric, kumkum powder, sandalwood. The wonderful name Nimai was given to the Lord by Sita Thakurani. She's the one because he was born underneath a neem tree. You know, there's still a neem tree there. I don't think it's not the original neem tree. When you go to Mayapur, you'll see there's a neem tree growing at the spot where he appeared. In Krishna Lila, Sita Thakurani is Yogamaya or Purnamasi. When you read about Krishna's detailed in the Vrindavan, Purnamasi is an elder grandmother figure. She's actually Yogamaya, as it says here. And she's always like arranging, you know, for Krishna and Radha to meet and all these things. She's that's her role. At Krishna's birth ceremony, she, Purnamasi, gave many instructions about childcare to Nanda and Yashoda. Similarly, in Gaur Lila, Sita Devi would often help Sachi Mata nurture baby Nimai. Sita Devi and Sachi Mata were of one mind. Their life and soul was Nimai. Because of Sita Devi's pure maternal love, Sachi Mata often chose her as the first person to worship Nimai Pandit during any auspicious ceremony. Later, Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda often came to Shantipur to visit Advaita Acharya and Sita Thakurani. They would collect all the neighbors and hold an uproarious festival of Krishna Kirtan, extending late into the night. When Lord Chaitanya moved to Puri, Advaita Prabhu and Sita Devi would regularly visit him. When you read Chaitanya Charitamrita, they would come for 20 years. All the residents of Vrindavan, of Navadvip, would walk all the way from Bengal into Orissa to Puri and check out the map. It's at least 600-700 miles. And they would all be ecstatic, chanting and everything. And so she was part of that the entourage that would come. What did I do here? I lost my place. Okay, just give me a second. There's a couple of more words here. And got it. Okay. Festival Krishna Nam. She would would regularly visit him. Sita Thakurani would cook Mahaprabhu's favorite foods and offer lunch to him. This is all in Puri. Sita Devi loved Lord Chaitanya as his son, and he loved her as his mother. And that brings us to the point. We have to adjourn for the kirtan. Hare Krishna.